And do not let the title fool you. I ended up giving the Cider House Rules 4 stars, and that was for one reason and one reason only that I will be getting into. For those who don't know, a little quick summary. The Cider House Rules by John Irving is set in the fictional town of St. Cloud's, Maine. We have one of our main characters, Dr. Wilbur Larch, who is the orphanage physician at St. Cloud's Orphanage, and he is able to let women give birth to children that they don't want, so then they thus become an orphan. The orphanage and helping women give birth is a cover for him to be able to provide safe abortions for women as well who are looking to receive them. Our other main character is Homer Wells. He is an orphan at St. Cloud's Orphanage, and he is adopted 3 times, but for various reasons they never work out, so he ends up growing up at the orphanage. Naturally, a father and son dynamic forms. Dr. Larch ends up taking Homer under his wing and teaching him how to help women give birth, and he also teaches him a bunch of other medical things, including how to perform an abortion. And surprisingly, Homer takes to it very well. Dr. Larch even says that he'll know the amount like a college graduate would know by the time or before the time he's even 18. Once Homer is about 20 years old, we have some new characters that are introduced to the story. We have Candy, Kendall, and Wally Worthington, and a whole other cast of characters that come from an apple orchard where they either live or just work on. Candy and Wally go to St. Cloud's to get an abortion. That is how Homer first meets them, and of course Homer instantly falls in love with Candy. He eventually also ends up becoming best friends with Wally. After Candy gets her procedure and she leaves, they take Homer with them to work at the apple orchard, and you learn about what the Cider House Rules, etc., all that stuff is. That is where I will be stopping the summary. Spoiler and trigger warning, okay? In this next section of the video, I'm going to be talking about topics on addiction, or just talking about addiction. There is some racism in this book, there is sexual assault, and unfortunately, incest. So I will be getting into all of that. Again, if you do not want to be spoiled, please stop watching. And if any of the things I previously mentioned, but we'll say again, addiction, racism, sexual assault, and incest. Unfortunately, I'm going to be talking about what I loved about the Cider House Rules, what I liked about the Cider House Rules, and what I hated about the Cider House Rules. So let's get into it. So what did I love about the Cider House Rules? The reason why this book got 4 stars, especially after making this video, I was constantly asking myself why. And the reason is because of the character, Dr. Wilbur Larch. So I am the kind of reader where not only a character can carry a book, but I read books for the characters. Talking about it with my sister, that is not something she reads books for. She says she reads for like the plot and like the story, which yeah, I think a majority of people do. I am not one of those people. A character can and will, in the case of the Cider House Rules, carry a story. I can say with my full chest, the whole reason this book got 4 stars is because of Dr. Wilbur Larch, and literally nothing and no one else. So, a little bit about Dr. Larch. He's an INFJ. I'm very into the Myers-Briggs 16 personality type stuff, and he and I have the same personality type. He's an INFJ. I love it. Throughout the book, something else, for his cover of being able to perform abortions, he calls it, and he makes everybody else call it, the Lord's work. And Dr. Larch stands on business the whole book. Oh my goodness. He has an experience where he doesn't provide a woman an abortion and she ends up dying. He deals with the grief of having been able to do something but just choosing not to, and that resulting in the loss of a life, especially as a doctor. So he really wrestles with that, but instead of just wallowing in it, he does something about it, and he makes it, yes, his life's work, his life's mission, to make sure that women who need it have access to a procedure that they would not otherwise. And it is something that is so refreshing to read about in a character, especially in a story that takes place during this time period. But yes, Dr. Larch stands on business. Something else about Dr. Larch's character, it's kind of funny, and it's done way better in the book. I'm not going to do it justice by explaining it here, but pretty much just by writing letters, he is able to develop a whole medical education history. He makes a mailing address, correspondence even between him and Fuzzy Stone, even though he's Fuzzy Stone. Yeah, the character of Dr. Larch, if he's not working, he's always at the typewriter. So he was always writing letters to freaking somebody, and he somehow sets it up perfectly so that when Homer does eventually replace him, he comes back without ever having had to have gone to medical school or anything, because Dr. Larch set it up for him, and Homer's qualified for it. He just doesn't have the qualifications, funny enough, but Dr. Larch does it, and he is a freaking genius, and it is done very well in the book, I have to say. Something else about Dr. Larch's character, I don't know why I keep holding the book up. It's not something that I like or that I deem positive, but it is something that adds depth to his character that I really appreciate. He is an ether addict. When he was in college, he contracted an STI, and during this time period, the 1930s, and it might even have been the 20s at that time, but there was not a cure, there was no medicine for it, so it was very painful, and to help deal with that pain, he started taking ether, and it just kind of unfortunately became a habit and an addiction. And thinking about his character, I don't know if he knows he's addicted. I'd have to reread it. I don't know if I'll ever reread it, but I would have to be able to figure that out. I don't know if he knows he's addicted or not, or if he just sees it as a habit, because that's what it's referred to all the time. There is a passage early on in the book where he is talking about how his father was an alcoholic, but he never looked drunk, he never acted drunk. And it's the same for his addiction. He always smells like ether, and it's like a cologne almost. So, and he's a doctor, so it's like, oh, of course he smells like that. But it's like, no, he's an addict for sure. And just like, so many addictions, unfortunately, he does end up succumbing to his addiction. He lives a long life. He lives to like his 90s, but still, it's always sad when a character dies. But I will be reading the passage of his passing. I don't know how to word that better. The cause of death would be respiratory failure due to aspirational vomit, which would lead to cardiac arrest. The Board of Trustees, in light of the evidence submitted against him, would privately call it a suicide. The man was about to be disgraced, they told themselves. But those who knew him and understood his ether habit would say it was the kind of accident a tired man would have. Certainly, Mrs. Grogan knew, and Nurse Angela, and Nurse Edna, and Nurse Caroline knew too, that he was not a man about to be disgraced. Rather, he was a man about to be no longer of use. And a man of use, Wilbur Larch had thought, was all that he was born to be. When he died, when I read it for the first time, I cried so hard. He walks around doing things he hadn't really done before, and I was like, he's about to die, isn't he? And he freaking did. Oh, good night, Wilbur Larch. Good night, Wilbur Larch. If you understand what that means, you've clearly read the book, and if you didn't, I'm not going to explain it. To get it, you would just have to read it, so whatever. Something else I loved about the Cider House Rules was the father-son dynamic that is formed between Dr. Larch and Homer Wells. Like I said, Dr. Larch is an INFJ, and Homer is an ISFP. And in my personal research of the Myers-Briggs personality types, you do not see a lot of that dynamic at all. Literally right when I was like, oh man, I wish I had more examples of it, I started reading this and I was like, oh my gosh, they're an INFJ and an ISFP. Ugh. But yeah, you do not see a lot of this dynamic. The other aspect of it that I liked a lot was how Dr. Larch really became Homer's father without intending to do so. He never wanted to be a father, and especially working at an orphanage, the last thing you would want to do is become their parent because they're already an orphan and you don't want to give them that hope potentially. I'm going to read some passages about that. So to give some context before I start reading this next part, another character by the name of Melanie, she's quite prominent throughout the story, but I'm not going to really talk about her in this video. She flashes Homer her butthole. So Dr. Larch is like, I don't know what to do about that. And this is the passage about what happens after. When Homer told Dr. Larch what Melanie had done to him, Dr. Larch reconsidered the wisdom of allowing Homer to read to the girls' division. But to remove this chore from the boys' duties would constitute, Larch felt, a kind of demotion. Homer might suffer a sense of failure. The work at an orphanage is fairly decisive. When Wilbur Larch felt indecisive regarding Homer Wells, he knew he was suffering from the natural feelings of a father. The thought that he had allowed himself to become a father and a sufferer of a father's indecision so depressed Dr. Larch that he sought the good piece of ether, to which he was becoming steadily more accustomed. And another passage is just something that just touched my heart when I read it, and I just want to share it. I don't care. To give some context, sorry. Dr. Larch was preoccupied and away from the orphanage, and a woman was there to give birth, and she was going through these really bad convulsions or something. They're the medical jargon is very realistic, I guess you could say. John Irving did a lot of research. A woman is going through these very bad convulsions where women usually die from, and he helps her through it, and he also delivers the baby, and she's healthy and the baby's healthy, and he did it. And yeah, in the passage it says his age, but he did it by himself and he did a very good job. But this is the passage after this is over and Dr. Larch is back at the orphanage. He had slept almost through the night. He woke only once on the dispensary bed, aware that Dr. Larch was back. Larch was in the room, probably looking at him, but Homer kept his eyes closed. He somehow knew Larch was there because of the sweet scent of ether which Larch wore like cologne, and because of the steadiness of Larch's breathing. Then he felt Larch's hand, a doctor's hand, feeling for fever, pass very lightly over his forehead. Homer Wells, not yet 20, quite accomplished in obstetrical procedure and as knowledgeable as almost any doctor on the care of the female organs of generation, lay very still, pretending to sleep. Dr. Larch bent over him and kissed him very lightly on the lips. Homer heard Larch whisper, "Good work, Homer." He felt a second even lighter kiss. "Good work, my boy," the doctor said, and then left him. Homer Wells felt his tears come silently. There were more tears than he remembered crying the last time he had cried, when Fuzzy Stone had died and Homer had lied about Fuzzy to Snowy Meadows and the others. He cried and cried, but he never made a sound. He would have to change Dr. Larch's pillowcase in the morning, he cried so much. He cried because he had received his first fatherly kisses. Homer Wells cried because he'd never known how nice a father's kisses could be, and he cried because he doubted that Wilbur Larch would ever do it again, or would have done it if he thought Homer was awake. It's just sweet. It's just very sweet, and John Irving did a very good job writing that. Next, I will be going into what I liked about the book. Something that is included throughout the entire story is the book Great Expectations, David Copperfield, and Jane Eyre. Little Dorrit is also mentioned a few times, but it's not really significant. Homer rereads Great Expectations and David Copperfield. I don't know how many times, because he likes to really likes to reread books. I'm like, I get it. But John Irving, he takes a lot of inspiration, very obviously, from Charles Dickens with like the orphan stories, and then he also he comes up with a character he really likes and then just puts them through the worst thing he can think of. And that's, from what I understand about Charles Dickens, that was also the same thing he would do, even though I don't think his characters are necessarily as likable, but he does like putting them through stuff. And yeah, Jane Eyre, just another story of, you know, wanting to change your life and wanting to get out there and like do more and da-da-da. I haven't finished any of them. I've started all of them. I've read at least a chapter of each, but I'm interested to see what similarities there are within the stories between these. Something else that I like about the Cider House Rules is that John Irving is a very talented writer. He's a very good writer. I understand why to some people that this is considered like a modern classic, I think, a modern American classic. I wouldn't say the same. I would disagree with that, but obviously, if that's what someone thinks, that's what they think. Something specifically that I liked that he would do throughout the story was use a character's senses to set the scene, or just like put you in the setting with the character. Obviously, it's not something that doesn't happen in books, but I guess with my most recent reading, it's something that, you know, the way a place smells, what you hear in the background, all these things, it's not something that I can remember or recall reading a lot, but in this book it happens a few times and I really do enjoy it. Like I said before, John Irving does have a very good way of putting words together, but not so good with plot and certain character development. And I will be getting into what I hated about the Cider House Rules. Alright, what did I hate about the Cider House Rules? The main thing, there is this really annoying, like boring, secondary romantic subplot thing that happens throughout the second half of the book. It's hard to see, but the first portion is mostly these blue tabs. These green ones, the dark green ones, are from when I was making the video, but in this last half they're lighter and like all green. Yeah, from it going from the blue, see, I can see it better, to the green, this is the good part of the book, and this is the, like, I don't want to say terrible, but just boo, like trash. Like, I just didn't like it, because this, I read it so fast, it was so good, and then he leaves St. Cloud's and it just goes downhill, bro. That subplot is, or the subplot secondary, I don't even know what to call it, is the main reason why. So I will be explaining it and going into it. The main issue does come from John Irving's writing of the characters, specifically the character of Candy, but all of the female characters in this book are reduced to either being motherly, they're unattractive, undesirable, or they're just the prettiest, most perfect girl in the world, Candy. There is so much that happens in this second half of the book. The main things that happen are due to Candy's character and her wants and desires, and we don't even get to see her thought process behind all of these decisions. It would be understandable of all these things happening if she was a super commanding character, but she's not. She's nothing of the sort. She is probably one of the most flat characters throughout this entire novel, and she's stubborn and just, incredibly indecisive. And I think that was John Irving's way of being like, see, this is the worst thing that Homer Wells could be put through, being or instantly falling in love with an indecisive woman, and one who already has a boyfriend. But it's like, she's just a bad character. Wally goes to fly planes in World War II, and while he's gone, Homer and Candy are able to like have a conversation about how they feel about each other, and they feel the same. But Candy says she has to wait and see until Wally comes back, because, you know, her whole life she's expected to marry Wally, and she just met Homer, but she still has feelings for him similar to Homer. And it's like, that makes more than enough sense. But throughout the story, that gets so annoying because that's like all she says. Wally's plane ends up crashing. He goes missing. And he's not announced dead. They have not found him dead. And his mom, Olive, until she hears that he's dead, she thinks he's alive. But Homer and Candy assume he's dead a little bit sooner rather than later. And once they do, they decide they're going to be together and they have sex for the first time, and Candy gets pregnant. I'm like, why? Instead of going to St. Cloud's to get an abortion like she did before when her and Homer first met, and Wally, they go to St. Cloud's so she can have that baby. Okay, so despite everything, despite Wally not being completely dead, maybe, who knows, Candy decides to have Homer's baby. Homer wants to marry her and all this stuff, but because of like the potential judgment from Wally's mom, she decides that she doesn't want to tell anybody just quite yet. About a week after their son, Angel Wells, is born at St. Cloud's Orphanage, it comes out that Wally is actually alive. He is actually alive. He survived. And it just gets worse. I'm just going to read a few passages of the interactions between Homer and Candy after it comes out that Wally is actually alive. And they have a newborn son, 1 week old. That child is 1 week old. She carried that baby for 9 months. And he's 1 week old, and they found out Wally's alive, okay? These are the passages after. How do you feel? Homer asked. I won't know until I see him, Candy said honestly. What will you know then? Homer asked. If I love him, or you, or both of you, she said. Or else I won't know any more than I know now. It's always wait and see, isn't it? Asked Homer. You don't expect me to tell him anything when he's still over there, do you? Candy asked. No, of course I don't expect that, he said softly. She held him tighter, and she began to cry again. Instead of worrying about their child, she's worried about she won't know until she sees Wally, and if she loves him or if she loves Homer. It's like, girl, you just had his baby. What do you mean? What are you talking about? It's very annoying. And then here is this next part that's a few pages down. We have to know where we're going, said Homer Wells. But what if we don't know? Candy asked. What if we only know how we want to stay? What if we wait and wait? Do you mean that you won't ever know if you love him or me? Homer asked her. It may all be confused by how much he's going to need me, Candy said. You don't think I'll need you too? He asked her. We'll have to wait and see, she said. Past a certain point, I won't wait, said Homer Wells. What point is that? Candy asked. When Angel's old enough to either know he's an orphan or know who his parents are, Homer said. That's the point. I won't have Angel thinking he's adopted. I won't have him not knowing who his mother and father are. I'm not worried about Angel, Candy said. Angel will get lots of love. I'm worried about you and me. And Wally, Homer said. We'll go crazy, Candy said. We won't go crazy, Homer said. We've got to take care of Angel and make him feel loved. But what if I don't feel loved, or you don't? What then? Candy asked. We'll wait until then, said Homer Wells. We'll just wait and see, he said, almost with a vengeance. Candy is so annoying. You just had a child. And yeah, like Homer's saying, it's like, we need to make sure he feels loved. And she's like, but what about you? What about me? It's like, you're a grown adult who just had a child. Please. Gosh. It's so frustrating. I understand John Irving wanting to put Homer through stuff. But if that's what he's going through, it's terrible. And it's not well done. Like, what kind of reasons are these? What kind of character says this? And she's just so empty. It's just, there's nothing in there. And it's like, why would he write her like that? Why would he have Homer instantly fall in love with her like an idiot? That's not even the worst part, okay? We still have more to get through, all right? Like I said, a week after she gives birth to their son, her and Homer's son, and finds out that Wally's alive. 2 pages after the patches I just read, there's a new chapter. The chapters are super long in this book, and it goes from her just having that baby to a 15-year time jump. Eventually, Homer and Candy move back to the apple orchard, and everyone sees and meets their baby, and they're lying and saying that they adopted him, and everyone's literally like, oh, that's their baby. They have to want to tell people, and if they don't, that's their decision, even though everybody literally knows that that's their kid. So Wally's mom dies, Candy's dad dies. There is literally a quote where Candy goes, even the death of her father would not cause her to tell anybody the truth. Why is she like this? We don't see Candy and Wally's wedding. She has a child with Homer, but after Wally comes back, he got an infection while he was in Burma, and he got an infection that had him paralyzed completely at first, but then after getting medical treatment, only his legs were paralyzed. He does come back disabled, and he is in a wheelchair. And he writes a letter to Candy, and he refers to himself as the C word, referring to disabled people. I don't know if it's a slur or not, so I'm just gonna be safe and not say it. He says, oh, I don't know if you'll want to marry a disabled person, but uses the C word. And that just like fills her with so much guilt that she feels obligated to marry Wally. So she ends up doing that. And they get married a month after he comes back. So Candy was on the move, bro. And yeah, we missed the wedding. All we see is this little snippet saying Homer pushed him down the freaking aisle. And I'm like, oh my gosh, get a backbone, Homer. We miss Wally seeing Angel for the first time. Like so many of the characters, like I said before, they know that Angel is their child, but they're just not telling anybody, and Wally is one of those people. And even in the author's notes, John Irving says literally that Wally is tolerating their fiction, their whatever they did, having a freaking child while he was in war, and I guess he doesn't care. I just don't understand. And yeah, that's never like gone into. It's like, how do you not care? Not only is it never gone into, when Homer tells Angel that Candy is his mom and he's his actual dad, that he's not adopted, because yeah, they lie to him and tell them that he's adopted for the first 15 years of his life. Candy telling Wally the truth is done off camera too. You see them start to have the conversation and it's just gone. I'm like, I want to see the reactions. I want to know what questions they ask. I want to know what they would have to say. But no, it's just skimmed over for stuff I don't care about. When it comes time to fess up, it is another aspect of Candy's character that is just so annoying and frustrating, because Homer literally, and I will read it, he says it's time to do the right thing, and Candy's just like, I don't want to hurt anyone, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, what do you think you've been doing? Lying to everybody, letting your dad die, knowing, both of you knowing that you're a liar. Like, you're more proud about that instead of owning up to the truth. Like, you're a grown woman with a child and playing two men, honestly. Like, you can't take some accountability? Come on. But this is the passage. It's time to tell everyone everything, said Homer Wells. No more waiting and seeing. I'll work it out with you any way you want to do it, Homer said. Whether you want to be with me when I tell Angel, whether you want me with you when you tell Wally, any way you want it, it'll be okay. You're going to make Angel hate me, Candy cried. Angel will never hate you, Homer said to her. To Angel, you've always been just what you are, a good mother. She held the serving tongs for the asparagus, and Homer thought she might attack him, but she just kept wrenching the tongs open and closed in her hands. Wally will hate me, she cried miserably. You're always telling me that Wally knows, said Homer Wells. Wally loves you. And you don't love me anymore, do you? Candy said. She started to blubber. Then she threw the serving tongs at Homer. Then she clenched her fists against her thighs. She bit down so hard on her lower lip that it bled. When Homer tried to dab at her lip with a clean dish towel, she pushes him away. I love you, but we're becoming bad people, he said. She stamped her foot. We're not bad people, she cried. We're trying to do the right thing. We're trying not to hurt anybody. We're doing the wrong thing, said Homer Wells. It's time to do everything right. Yeah, Homer, for once, standing up for yourself. God, she's just reduced to this immature outburst when Homer's trying to be accountable, take responsibility for what they've done, and she just refuses to. And it's never like examined or explored why, right? I can make all these assumptions and guesses as to why, but it is never told. It's like, this book is 602 pages. You can offer a little bit of a passage to freaking Candy's inner workings and why she makes the decisions she does. Like, oh my goodness. Throughout this whole book, and it's just a testament to the poor way John Irving wrote this character, is that the one thing I can tell you definitively about Candy Kendall, the character, is the fact that she likes having sex more with Homer than with Wally. Why? Who knows? And I can't remember if I said it earlier, but I'll say it now. Throughout that 15 years, and like I said, she's married to Wally, and they're lying to their son that he's an orphan, and everybody else that he's an orphan, even though everybody knows that is their baby. They're also having an affair. I don't know if I said that, but they both literally keep track of the amount of times that they've had sex since her and Wally got married. So I'm like, yeah, you're really trying to do the right thing and not hurt anybody, Candy. Good job. 600 pages into the book, 2 pages before the end, there's one little passage that is the last thing to be in Candy's perspective, the last thing to ever be said from her. And as I like to put it, it is Candy's last words. And I will be reading those to you right now. And after a while, he would write to Candy and say that he had become a socialist, or at least that he had become sympathetic to socialist views. Candy understood by this confession that Homer was sleeping with Nurse Caroline, which he had also understood would be good for them. That is, this new development was good for Homer and for Nurse Caroline, and it was good for Candy too. Huh? What? What? What do you mean? I hit my mic. What do you mean? What do you mean? This is 600 pages into this book, and this is the last thing. Why is this in here? Why did I just read that? Why? I remember reading it and literally being like, okay, like, edit that out. Why is that in here? I literally don't care. See, that's all Candy cares about, is what Homer's doing with his thing. She understood this by this confession that Homer was sleeping with Nurse Caroline. Homer didn't say that. How do you know? See, and I don't even know if they for sure are. I don't even remember reading that. So it's like, why? Just why? And that is not even the worst part. It gets worse. There is, I wouldn't say a lot, but there is significant portions of unnecessary racism, in my opinion. Just to show some examples, there's a side character. There are so many characters in this book, oh my goodness. But there's a side character who's just like a jerk. Yeah, his name is Herb. And he just goes on this tirade talking about N-words. And those black marks are me crossing out the N-word because it's unnecessary. It should not be in this book. A bad character doesn't have to also throw around the N-word for me to know that he's a bad character, right? It's just completely unnecessary. And then on another page, a character tells another side character who I really liked up until this point, and then he just had her say this unnecessary racist joke towards Japanese people. Now, obviously, with this book partially taking place during World War II, it would make sense if there was some like underlying racism or like prejudice towards Japanese people, especially when during this time there were freaking internment camps for Japanese people. It wouldn't be surprising if, especially for a book taking place during this time, if characters were more casually racist towards Japanese people. But that's not something that happens before or after this portion of the book. From what I remember, the only time Japanese people are mentioned is when they talk about how the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. That is the only time before this that Japanese people are even mentioned. And yet, after this, there isn't like a Japanese character that's introduced that they have to get to know. No, it's just this random racist joke that is, like I said, unnecessary. And just to show, it's on page 371, and I have it crossed out, and that says unnecessary, because it is. There's that little blip, and then it goes to a freaking different part in the book. It's like, and it's never revisited again, nothing like that is ever said again. So it's just like, why? I know this is a work of fiction, and obviously fiction can have some realistic aspects to it. In this case, especially with this book being 602 pages and how long it is, there's no need for there to be these little blips of racism to just prove how either stupid or crass another character is. It's just unnecessary. I will stand on that. Finally, the worst part of this book is what I like to refer to as the Rose arc. Now, before I get into it, I will give a little bit of my perspective and then talk about what happens, okay? This is how I'll put it. The plot point that causes Homer Wells to become Dr. Larch's replacement at the orphanage of St. Cloud's is the character of Rose. Now, who is Rose? I will be getting into that in just a second. Instead of using a previous character, like, for example, earlier in the book when Homer first leaves the orphanage, he goes on a few dates and even a few double dates with Candy and Wally with this girl named Deborah Pettigrew. And something that would have been funny, in my opinion, is if instead of... So, Angel, Homer's son, falls in love at first sight, similar to his father, with Rose. And again, I will be explaining who that is in just a moment. But instead of him falling in love with her, it would have been funny if, say, he fell in love with, like, Deborah Pettigrew's daughter, say she had a daughter or something, and despite her and Homer not getting on well, like, say their kids did, and say, like, even though they're like 15, 16, she ends up getting pregnant, which happens with some kids, and Candy, being Angel's mom, is like, hell no, he's not having a kid at 16, you're gonna give her an abortion. I think that would have been a better way of Homer, like, coming to grips, because yeah, Homer's a pro-lifer for a minute. He more than understands that and believes that women should have access to abortions. He just doesn't want to perform them because he's a pro-lifer genuinely. And so it would have been a little bit more funny if he was like, oh, I could be pushed into it so easy by this woman, I don't know why I don't just do it, right? Instead, we get incest. Yeah. 485 pages into this 602-page book, John Irving decides to introduce a brand new character just so she can be impregnated by her father, thus obligating, as I believe, Homer to realize that he should be performing abortions for women. That is the point of this character, and I'm gonna go a little bit more into it because it's just poorly done. Like I said earlier, Angel immediately falls in love with Rose's character as soon as he sees her. And yeah, just some background about her character. So there's another character who's been in the story a bit longer, and his name is Mr. Rose, and he is the black migrant leader of the people who come to the apple orchard to pick apples when it is that season. and he's ahead and in charge of all of those people. And so with Rose coming, Rose is his daughter. So like I said, his last name is Mr. Rose, and he decides to name his daughter Rose. I read some Goodreads reviews and people were giving a lot of the names grief, like specifically Candy and Angel. I do not have beef with those names at all. I really don't care. But I do have a problem with Rose. It's just terrible, especially for like what she has to go throughout the book. So like I said, Angel falls in love with her and they start like a little bit of a romance, and it's honestly a little concerning because Angel is about 15, 16. And Rose's age is never told, and she does have a child. She has a young child, maybe 2, 3, maybe even 4 years old, and it's said that she seems a little older than Angel, but I don't know if she actually is or not. And it's kind of worrying because it's like, it would be weird if he had like a 20-year-old like kissing a 16-year-old, but I'm not gonna get into that. I'm just gonna assume that she is a minor. Because Rose and Angel have this little relationship, they are kissing this one time, and Angel is touching her back, and when he brings his hand away, there's blood, and he's like, "Are you okay?" And turns out that her father, who is notoriously known for like toting a knife around and like being good with a knife, she has these like razor thin cuts on her back, and it's like Angel goes to his parents and Wally and are like, "Hey, she was bleeding pretty bad and I'm almost certain that it was her father that cut her." And these grown adults who are this man's boss sit there and go, "Well, what are we gonna do for a young black girl during this time? You know, it'd be worse if we called the cops on her." It's like, I think her getting cut up by her father is the worst thing that's happening to her right now. So how about we help her instead of just sitting around talking about her, especially when you're her dad's boss, all right? Just help her out, please. A little later, she tells Angel that she's pregnant and she will not tell him who the father is. She's like trying to hurt herself to lose the baby. And obviously Angel becomes super concerned and goes to tell them. Candy's like, "I'm just going to take her away to make sure she's okay." And the cider house is the place where the migrants stay. So she goes to the cider house to see, and like the cider house rules, one of the rules is don't sit on the roof, but like all of the migrants sit on the roof. And so Candy goes there. She doesn't see Mr. Rose and she doesn't see Rose. So she just goes up to the roof just to sit with them, and she hears something going on in the cider house, but she's not like paying attention to it. And then she comes to comprehend what it is, and this is like a little bit of redemption, you could say, Candy gets, but honestly not really, because it took her hearing Mr. Rose doing what he does to his daughter, doing what got her pregnant, and she goes in and she stops it and she takes Rose away. And then she also tells Homer that the father is her father, so she needs an abortion immediately. That is what causes Homer to decide to start giving abortions, and I'm going to read the passage. "After the first one, thought Homer Wells, this might get easier, because he knew now that he couldn't play God in the worst sense. If he could operate on Rose, how could he refuse to help a stranger? How could he refuse anyone? Only a God makes this kind of decision. I'll just give them what they want, he thought, an orphan or an abortion." Homer Wells breathed slowly and regularly. The steadiness of his hand surprised him. He did not even blink when he felt the curette make contact. He did not divert his eyes from witnessing the miracle. Boo, 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 boo. In conclusion, throughout this book, the most horrific things about it is the reality for women when they do not have access to a safe abortion. And despite the amount of examples that Dr. Larch has of him not only not helping women, but choosing to, and even when he does his best and them dying, him still being more than determined to be able to provide women with safe abortions. Despite that, despite his literal baby mother the first time the meeting, she was there to get an abortion, despite the countless women that Homer himself, in his perspective, talks about watching going to and from the orphanage. Like, yeah, there's a hill that they walk up and down from the train station, and him wondering if she's coming, yeah, to get an abortion or give an orphan. Despite all of that, all the potential things that John Irving could have pulled from, could have had some important like introspection and like growth within Homer's character to come to this realization, instead of doing that, John Irving decides to introduce a brand new character 485 pages into the book that happens to be a young black girl with a child, and made the writing decision to put her through the worst case scenario when it comes to someone who requires an abortion. That was a writing decision that John Irving willingly made. This 602-page book, the best idea that this author could come up with was having a young black girl character be impregnated by her father, so his main character will take his rightful place. And yeah, she kills her father. Thank God she kills him. She stabs him and he bleeds out slowly. But like, everybody at the orchard, in Homer included, just like stand around and watch him die. It's like, can we kick him in the head a few times? Like, stab him a few more times, maybe shoot him? I don't know. They didn't want his death to be deemed a suicide, or that's what he said. And I'm like, I don't want anybody's listening to him. We need to curb stomp him and just say that he was raping his daughter and somebody stabbed him. We could do that. I think that would be a perfect ending to it as well. But yeah, she does kill him, which is like, yeah. Unfortunately, due to the Rose arc and the very unfortunate writing decision and unnecessary writing decision that John Irving came up with, he really couldn't think of nothing else. He couldn't think of anything else. No other option. He couldn't use any other character. He had to put her through that. Sure. But anyway, yes, with the ending of not only this book, but this video, I am only left with a love for Wilbur Larch and confusion. There's nothing but a why on my lips. Have you read The Cider House Rules? If you did, what'd you think? What'd you rate it? If you got to this portion of the video, do you think you'll ever read The Cider House Rules? Do you think you'll watch the movie if you're not going to read it? I refuse to watch the movie because the Rose arc is in the movie. And yeah, I read the author's notes. John Irving doesn't say anything about Rose and what his thought behind the decision was. He just says, yep, Rose's character needing an abortion is what causes Homer to need to take his rightful place. Like I said, he couldn't freaking think of anything else. But yeah, I'm not watching the movie. And how much do you think that an author's writing decision should be examined? If anything, does this writing decision say anything about John Irving as a person? I'm not trying to cancel him or anything or do anything like that. It's just a genuine question I have because I'm genuinely confused. Like, I really don't know how this was the only thing this revered author could come up with. Yes, thank you so much for watching me just talk about The Cider House Rules by John Irving. If you want to see more of me and hear how good of a singer I am, you can check out my music channel, Shy Fighter. I also have original music under the same name of Shy Fighter. But yes, thank you so much again for watching. Like if you want to like, subscribe if you want to subscribe. I don't know. Do whatever you would like to do. Thank you so much again for watching, and I will see you when I see you. Farewell. The Cider House Rules does in fact not rule.